Hello and welcome to Tracy Momi Reads. I am back again with another video. Today, I'm going to be talking about the book Echo of Old Books by Barbara Davis. The Echo of Old Books by Barbara Davis. Excuse me. The Echo of Old Books by Barbara Davis. This was a very different book from books I've read lately. This book, I feel like, was a reminder about why I love reading so much, why I love the written word. It is definitely in the women's fiction or literary fiction category. It was just such a, when you talk about, I can't even really find the right words to use. My vocabulary seems inadequate today. But when you talk about escapism, I know sometimes with some books we want to escape into a mystery where we're solving something, right? Or into a comedy where, you know, we get to laugh if we're feeling sad, or a love story, you know, that makes us feel good. But then there are some books that also transport you to an entirely different time and place, right? And I'm not talking about like with fantasy books, you know, yeah, obviously those are, you know, the authors have done this world building and, you know, this fantastical stuff that exists and you have to kind of picture it in your mind. But with this particular book, even though it's a fictional book, because, you know, I love stuff like this where the authors kind of weave in actual historical stuff within the book, and you know, makes you think briefly like, wait a minute, what am I reading here? Is this really happen? Like you want to go Google stuff to see if you can, you know, see pictures and images when it's all just a figment of their imagination. But they told the story so wonderfully that it seems so real. Imagery is just so palpable. And in this story, The Echo of Old Books, it's two stories within one. I've been reading a lot of stories like this lately, where there are like a book within a book or two stories within one, and they actually, you know, revolve around someone having written a book and then present day someone's reading that book. And that's the same thing that pretty much happens in this story. So the other thing I thought was interesting, usually when you get books like that, it's present day, like, so whatever our time period is, you know, if it's 2021 or 2008, like when you're reading the book, it's more present day. And then you have this thing that happened maybe a few decades ago. Well, in this story, it is 1984. That's the present day when we're introduced to one of the main characters, and her name is Ashlyn. And she is a bookstore owner, okay? She's a bookstore owner, but she has this like unique ability. So there's a little fantastical element to the story where she can, if she touches a book or touches the pages of a book, she can feel the emotions that the reader was having. So hence the title, The Echo of Old Books. There's like an echo there of what people were feeling when they read it, right? And as a result, she has been able to amass quite a collection of what is it, rare type books, and books that were maybe previously owned by people, and this and that. And she also does book binding on the side. That's where she primarily makes her money, because she deals with a lot of very old books. So like I said, 1984 is our present day. Now she has a friend that has like a sounds like a pawn shop or maybe a consignment shop. I'm not really sure. But sometimes if he gets in books, you know, because those really don't have a lot of resale on his end, he'll let her know about them. So she goes and she picks up this book. And the first thing she notices about it is there is no publication date. It's called Regretting Belle, and there's no author. There's no like the page that comes in the front that tells you the copyright, the publisher. None of that. It's just Regretting Belle in the title page. Then the story starts. So, and because she's getting such incredible emotions from this book, I guess like you could call her an empath for books or whatever. But because she's getting so many like emotions from this book, she is just so intrigued. And she starts reading it, and just from the title of the book, it's obvious that somebody has some regrets about somebody named Belle, right? And she can tell that the voice is in a man's voice, right? Because the way that he's talking, and he's talking about this woman that he met. Well, that story takes place in 1941, and it is like some years after the Great Depression, but right before Hitler did what he did. So there's a lot of conversation about this war and about, people in the States kind of conspiring with Hitler, like within this story, even though that's not what the story is about. It's about this man and woman and their pretty much illicit affair back in 1941. But because of who they were in society, like they, were privy to these conversations, and their stories are kind of peppered with that. So, in 1984, Ashlyn is just like, oh my gosh, she goes back to the store and it's like, hey, do you know who sent this? I wonder, if he could tell me who wrote it and, who the person is. And he's like, no, some guy was cleaning out his dad's basement, or his dad died, but I didn't get his name. We were talking, but that was it. So, long story short, another book comes in from the same collection, and it is called Forever and Other Lies. And Ashlyn gets her hand on that book, and what she quickly finds out is that they are basically the same book, two different points of view. Regretting Belle is by the man who was in this illicit affair, and Forever and Other Lies is by the woman. So you're getting these two different points of view of the exact same story. So she starts reading through it and, comparing notes, and, they both are just like, contradicting each other, but at the same time, they're telling pretty much the same story. So this guy, she finds out, there was an envelope that was in a box that the guy who bought the books, to the consignment shop. So the owner of the shop was like, hey, I found an envelope and it has an address. I mean, I don't know if it's this guy's address, but I'm going to give it to you. Tell him where you got it from. But it's worth a try if you really want to try to get in touch with him. And she just had to know, because they were like name dropping people and they were part of this. She was like, are these famous people? Is it so-and-so? Is it, she's trying to figure it out. So this guy, Ethan, his dad had died, and turns out the woman who was in the book, who was Belle, because they weren't using like their real names in the book. The guy was using the name Hemi, like it's short for Hemingway, because he was a writer back then, and he called her Belle. So the guy Ethan, who brought those books in, his dad died, remember? Well, his dad was Belle's nephew. So, you go down this historical rabbit hole, both real and fictional. And I love stuff like that. Thinking of how people lived back before you were even here, before anything else was here. And I'm going to tell you why. I always find it so fascinating, whether I'm reading a biography or, autobiography, memoir, or a fiction story, when you talk about things that happened in the past and how people, even back then, they went through similar things that people today are still going through. And it's been, decades and decades, different centuries. And the world has been spending a long time, and a lot of the same shit is going on. That's my point, okay? But anyway, back to the book. It just was such a beautifully written story. There was just so much beautiful prose. So anyway, after Ashlyn, gets in contact with Ethan, so he's able to give Ashlyn a real name, and they start to kind of piece things together. And eventually they find out who the guy was that wrote the book after a few false starts with that. And through this whole process, like I said, there was a spark in the beginning. They start to fall for each other. But the thing that just made me like, it wasn't even it was a nail biter in that I'm like, oh my God, what are they going to do? What's going to happen next? Because we find out that both Hemi, who wrote Regretting Belle, and Belle, who, we find out their real names later, but she wrote Forever and Other Lies, they are both still alive. Okay? Because you got to think about, so in 1941, when the book starts off, Belle is 21. And Hemi, I think he's in his late 20s. So, you fast forward, it's like, 1984. That's only been 40 years. So they are both in their 60s now, but they are still both very much alive. And so Ashlyn actually gets to meet Belle, and she's just beside herself because just imagine if you're reading a book that you think is fiction about this and I never mentioned, I'm sorry, I'm so excited, let me back up here a minute. The reason why I say they were having an illicit love affair is because Belle was very much engaged to someone else. Her hand had been promised to another man. She came from a very rich family, and that's kind of what they did back then. They secured marriages between other rich families so they could kind of keep it all in the family. And Hemi, he was from London, and he was kind of, he was a journalist and a writer and not as well off as Belle. He was kind of struggling or whatever. So anyway, but just imagine you are reading a story about this great love affair or this amazing couple that is just giving you all the feels, and to come to find out they're real people and you get to meet them. Ashlyn she was just in heaven, okay? Well, there was like some drama because he got married, but him and his wife divorced before they could have any children, and it just wasn't, he never got over Belle. Like, that was the love of his life. And it was the same for her. She never got married, but she did have kids. She adopted 2 kids. At this time, when Ashley meets her kids are grown. She's a grandmother now. And she's getting this award, and Hemi shows up at the place where the award is being given out. And I will tell you, one of the biggest bombs that was dropped in the book, I don't know how I felt about it. I was loving the story, and I still love it. I still have a good aftertaste of it, right? But me and the way I hold on to grudges, I don't know. Hemi was, I feel like, he may have got over some stuff too quick once he found out some things that had transpired. But at the same time, he's a man in his late 60s. He's getting an opportunity to reconnect with the love of his life. Why are you going to waste time on shit you can't change? So I get it from that standpoint. There was just so much going on, with the back and forth, the budding relationship between Ashlyn and Ethan, finding out all the stuff that went down between Belle and Hemi back in the day, and with her family, with their bougie asses and all that stuff. And then there's breakup, and when they, even present day, when they, are reconnected and they learn that somebody else even had a hand in breaking them up. They both broke up 40 years ago thinking the other had abandoned them, and somebody else did all that shit. That would have really made me just, ooh, but karma is real. But like I said, there was another kind of surprise or kind of twist that Belle kind of sprung on Hemi. And like I said, he forgave her. I don't know, what I would have did in that situation. But overall, everybody got a happily ever after. And it was, a really good family drama with, definite romance, historical references, palpable imagery. So if you like that kind of stuff, if you want to get deep into a just a literary novel, then The Echo of Old Books, I really think that it would fit the bill. I will, be transparent here and admit to you, when I first started reading it, I was kind of like, because of what I've been doing here lately, like with the type of books I've been reading, it just was like failing to hold my interest. But midway through the first chapter, because I had a lot of stuff to do around the house, and normally, like I told you in another video, sometimes I'm walking around with my Kindle and I'm reading. Well, I needed my hands free. So with this particular book, I think it's a Prime read. If you have Prime, you can get it for free, through Kindle. They also had the audio version. So I was doing part reading and part audio. So I was listening while I was, washing and having to go outside and, and in the car and that type of stuff. And reading like at night when I was in the bed. So I was doing a hybrid of, audiobook and reading. And I will tell you, and I don't say this a lot because I have tried audiobooks, they're just not my favorite. And it's mostly, and it could be, I've heard people say, if you have the wrong narrator, the voice person, that it's going to be a bad experience. They had some really good people reading those books. All the voices were different. So for every character, unless it was the same man reading for Hemi and Ethan, and the same woman maybe reading for Ashlyn and Belle, but the accents and the nuances of their voices were just different enough that it made the story interesting and compelling, like you were listening to 4 different people tell that story. So that is a caveat. And just by listening to their voices, the richness of their voices, it was like you were listening to someone telling a story about their relatives or people that they knew back in the day. So, I found that to really heighten the experience overall of the book. So The Echo of Old Books, definitely would recommend this for, the serious readers, lovers of women's fiction, literary fiction. I think you'll really enjoy it. If you have read The Echo of Old Books, I would love to know what you thought about it. Let me know in the comments what you would have did if you were Hemi and you found out the secret that Belle had hid all these years. Let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure that you like this video and go ahead and take the opportunity to subscribe to my channel if you haven't. Thank you to everyone who has already subscribed, and go ahead and share this video with someone who you think may enjoy my content. Thanks again, guys. I'll see you next week. Bye.